And we're back. It's like we never left.
Did we leave? No, I
We're
don't think we left.
we're like a bad cold. We hang around for a long time.
I don't know. I don't know about you, but I don't consider myself a bad cold. I'm bright and sunshiny as the rain as the day after a rain.
Yeah, you're as bright as a daisy. You are.
I try to be.
Yeah. So, in case everybody hasn't figured it out yet, this is 2.5 Opinions, and you can listen to us live on the website, or you can pick us up as a recording, and you can even join us in the group chat if you chose to. Or if you have anything you'd like to say, keep it respectful. Irreverence, fine, but respectful. So, so anyway, I'm Frank.
The crossbreed between irreverence and respectful should be rather interesting. But I'm Yishai.
Okay, and not the Rebbe will join us in a moment.
Oh yeah, he's just grabbing the last few minute items.
Right.
But
So,
what do
Todd,
we?
sorry, I had the camera off and mic off and everything else, and I'm here.
see, he's right
here.
there. He's right there. So,
Enjoy the chaos of this Torah portion. It should be a short one.
it's not chaos. Our audience knows what to expect, and that's all they're willing to believe. So, I did say that right, didn't I?
Yes, you did say that right. Don't worry, you got that right.
You got that right. No, I can't. Can't play guitar.
But today, for those who are listening, we are covering Kedushim. Normally, it would be Achremot and Kedushim paired up in a double portion, but this time we've got them separated. And Kedushim is rather short, isn't it? It's a very short portion all by itself.
I need to make an apology for last week. I thought, because I was thinking in a totally different direction, I thought Kedosh, Akire and Moat were the split, but they're not. Akire Moat is a whole portion by itself, and Kedoshim is a whole portion by itself. But in a non-leap year, those two are together. So I apologize. I made a mistake. I'm sorry.
It's all right. If you knew Hebrew, then you'd understand Akrimot means after the death. So if you're splitting that up, it'd be after. And then
It'd be
death.
after then death.
Well, yeah, after and death, it's, but Kedoshim is set apart, right?
I can't help but laugh at that title situation real quickly before we actually really get started. After death, holiness.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting how you...
That's pretty deep. Well, okay, but look at it. After death, you've shuffled off this mortal coil, as the saying goes. You return to your creator. So, yeah, it works.
So, with Kedushim, it's such a short portion, and all of us are trying to figure out where to go. So why don't we get started? I'm thinking I'm just going to read the first 15 verses instead of worrying about aliyahs this time.
Okay, well, you're the one who wanted the sidebar with the after death Kedushim.
Oh, it was more of a point out funny thing, because it was like, it was one of those moments where you're just sitting there listening to everything that's being said around you, and then suddenly, aha.
Okay.
And so it was a fascinating way to look at it, especially when you look at the loadout, if you don't mind the weapon phrasing, the loadout of Akhremot and Kedushim. It almost kind of implies something more to be obtained when they're
So
together, even if they are separate from time to time.
so because they're normally together, so that our audience knows what to believe, and that's all they're willing to accept. So okay, what? All right, if you're ready, I'll do the blessing.
I I am ready. Let's get started.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar benu mikol ha'amim v'tan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Melech Ne'eman.
Amen. Doing something this different this time, using First Fruits of Zion's translation. Leviticus 19, verse 1 through 15. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father. You shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols, or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. When you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, or on the day after, and anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted, it will not be accepted. And everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them to the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. You shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another. You shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not oppress your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning. You shall not curse the deaf, or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear the Lord. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor, or defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah imet v'kayei olam notavi tukenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Melech Ne'eman.
Amen.
So, going with what you said earlier, Chris, it's the Ten Commandments all over again.
Yeah, it is. It really is. All the 10 Commandments are listed here. They're not listed in the exact same order, but it is fascinating that all the 10 Commandments are here. But we're given a little bit more into each one of them, and even with some, it's hard to understand: is this one of the 10 Commandments or not? It's kind of like we start off. Let me find it real quick. We're going to start off in the Torah portion. See, we're going to go through. God's told Moses, speak to the entire congregation. You shall be holy, for I am holy. I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every man fear his mother and his father. Well, that's not the first or second commandment. And then we go into, you're not going to bow down to idols, nor are you going to make idols. Okay, that seems like it's going back into the first 5 commandments. And then we break off with, when you slaughter the peace offering. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, let's move on down a little bit. Let's skip on down to verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap everything. You're going to leave a little bit off to the poor. Okay, that's kind of good. I don't see that in the 10 Commandments, but that's all right, because really we're talking about treating your mother and your father, treating each other, saving some for the poor. Don't steal is in verse 11. Don't hold back. Don't lie. Don't swear falsely, and don't use God's name whenever you swear falsely. And don't oppress your neighbor. Don't rob him. Make sure you pay him what they're worth when the work is done. And then we've got don't curse a deaf person, and don't put a stumbling block before the blind person. Okay, now I'm seeing a couple things here that aren't. It's the whole Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the others. All of this I can see as good, but when it comes to that slaughtering of the peace offering, why is that here? It doesn't seem like it belongs here. And then, do I really need God to tell me don't curse a deaf person? I mean, think about that for just a moment. Think this one through. Don't curse a deaf person. It's a non sequitur. It makes no sense, because cursing a deaf person, what good does that do? The deaf person can't hear it.
The deaf person can't defend themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the curse itself gets flung.
Oh. And then don't put a stumbling block before a blind person. Now that's just cruel. That's the kid out in the backyard with a magnifying glass burning ants or tearing the wings off of flies. It's truly, this one is just cruel. Do I really?
In the New Testament?
But my question is, do I really need the Torah to tell me not to do this? Are we that debased that God has to tell us even that one? And then we go on, don't commit injustice and judgment, and don't gossip. But we got a lot of things going on here until we finally get to love your neighbor as yourself. And so the sages even say that's the whole point of all of this. Love your neighbor as yourself. You don't need to be taught the rest of this if you would just treat everybody like you want to be treated and how you expect others to treat you. Treat them in that same manner. So what's going on here with the peace offering? Why is that even here? It's out of place. It makes no sense.
It's even more interesting that it's the peace offering out of all the other offerings. But then again, though, the peace offering is the only offering you get to eat. Is that correct? I believe so. It is the only one that you eat, the Kohanim eat, and gets burned up on the altar for God.
Yeah, so the peace offering.
It's the only one that all parties involved in get to eat. Is that correct?
Sure, if you want to consider that the Kohen are somehow involved in all of this, which you got to go to them to offer it up on the altar. So I guess they're somewhat involved. But the point is everybody gets some of this. What's it doing here? Well, if we're going to talk about sacrifices, which we've already done. So had we have really learned what we were supposed to have learned about the sacrifices back when it was being taught at the beginning of Leviticus or Vayikra, then maybe we'd have an understanding as to why this one and not all of them is talked about in this portion.
Well, these sacrifice, the rules and regulations that are around this sacrifice seem to show an understanding of social justices, if you will. What you should do in treating with your fellow man, and applying the treat others as you want to be treated. Well, if the whole concept "be holy for I am holy" is the main theme throughout all of this, because we will also see it at the end of this Torah portion where it is repeated, "Be holy for I am holy." If it is this way, then wouldn't the implication involve a mindset of Oh, I have it on the tip of my tongue. I want to say an implication of what belongs to you, what belongs to others, a boundary of sorts.
I have a question. Let us unpack the social justice thing just for a moment, okay? Because we have everybody using that term. social justice ad warrior, the civil contract we have between all of us is to treat each other fairly, not to overbear, not to burden, not to, etc., right? Okay. So when somebody co-ops this social justice expression, it leaves me concerned. So that when we speak about it, I think we need to define that it's God saying this is how you treat each other, not just social justice.
I understand, and I was just trying to toss them all into one basket quickly.
Okay,
It's
so
what you
I'm missing something here. So the social justice, treating each other, boundaries, etc. What does this peace offering have to do with anything else, or with any of this? I mean, what you guys are saying is got no problems. It's just, why are we bringing up this peace offering? Let me take a look at it real quick and get, kind of expound on it. When you slaughter the peace offering to the Lord, you shall slaughter it for your acceptance. Okay, that's almost word for word of what we've already been taught. It may be eaten on the day that you slaughter it and on the morrow, but anything left over until the third day shall be burned in fire. That is word for word of what's already been taught on the peace offering. Here's a different one, though. If it would be eaten on the third day, it is abominable. It shall not be accepted. Here's the troubling part that the rabbis have. If it would be eaten, that's future tense. It is now abominable. It is not accepted. That's present tense. How did we go from future tense to present tense? In other words, if it if it were to be eaten on the third day, then at the moment that you sacrifice it, it's not allowed. It's not acceptable.
I was about to. I have heard that in some of the other teachings that the implication is even if you think it in your mind that you are going to eat it on the third day, even if you're not going to say that out loud, it's still considered profane.
So this is where we diverge from what we've already been taught about the peace offering. Everything else that's mentioned in this Torah portion about the peace offering has already been taught.
Yeah, but
here's where we diverge. Even if you think it in your mind when you bring this peace offering, that I could still have some of the leftovers on Thursday, well, then it's not acceptable.
correct.
Who would know that besides you and God?
Correct. But doesn't this also echo with the when you hear all these laws and they're told to do them, that the person who says I will have security in their heart, they've already profaned everything that was given them, right?
Okay, and that's fitting, and it does go into here, but it's still not answering the question. Why is this here?
Well, how about we do this then? Now that we let's play under the concept of what this offering is. As it was said earlier in our previous discussion before the show, the peace offering can also be attributed as a covenantal offering, a offering between two parties who are striking a deal. If this is eaten after a certain time frame, the deal is null and void. So you are being deceptive in a deal in the same aspect as what it is saying further on in the Torah portion of being deceitful to your neighbor, not giving them their wages and everything like that. So it's portraying it in the same light as you treat God as the way you treat man, as the way you treat yourself.
There
So
you
that's
go.
verse 11, right? You shall not steal. You shall not deal falsely. You shall not lie to one another.
Yeah, but Jesse's got it. I mean, he hit it on the head. It was one of the first peace offerings that we get, or we can quasi call it a covenantal offering, and that is Jacob and Laban. and Jacob's fleeing Laban. He's got the family and the kids and all of his speckled sheep with him. And Laban catches up, and Jacob stops. He brings a sheep up. They slaughter it, and they share a meal. And he's stacking up stones. And Laban asks him, "So what's all this about?" He says, "We're cutting a covenant. We're making a deal." Okay. The issue, though, had Laban or Jacob had it in their mind that, okay, this is the boundary between you and me. There's not ever going to be war between us. This is where we are, and this is the covenantal meal that we're eating, the peace offering. We're eating this covenantal meal, representing that we are in agreement on these things. You give this, I give this. You receive this, I receive this. Here's our agreement. But if you entered into that agreement thinking, I'm going to settle for peace now so that I can attack you later, then there was never any deal to begin with. Why is that important here? Because we just talked about you will be holy because I'm holy. Your word will be true because my word is true. You will fear your mother and father. Why? Because they are representations of me from the very beginning of your life until the very end of your life. And you shall observe my Sabbaths. What is the Sabbath? It is a sign between me and you, a covenant forever through all your generations, that you shall keep the Sabbath and guard the Sabbath. So we're starting off with, here's our covenantal relationship. Now, if you joined into this covenantal relationship with your peace offering, again, there's no requirement for you to bring the peace offering. There's circumstances where it's expected within Judaism, but you're not going to find that in Torah. But the point is, if you came in here thinking that you'll get a little bit more out of this than what we agreed upon, then there was never a deal. So it's very odd and very interesting that this peace offering is presented here amongst all the other commandments that are kind of somewhat expounded upon or relayed to us in this Torah portion.
Yeah, that's so. It looks like man has to have it repeated to him over and over and over again for him to get it to set in. Sorry, I was just
No,
thinking
no,
out
no,
loud.
no. We can see that. It, how quickly do we all learn something? We learn it through repetition. We learn it through the constant reminder. But at what point do we say we understand, we know where we're going, and here's the path we take? In a sense that this 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 repetition brings to mind something else that has been always talked about, but this might jump us way off topic, or it might keep us on topic. I'm not exactly sure which. The mindset of creation out of all of this. There was a teaching I had heard not too long ago, and it details the understanding of why the Sabbath is treated the way it is. When if you're going to do a celebration over, say, for example, you're going to do a celebration of when I've forgotten the woman off the top of my head, the one who sat in the front of the bus.
Oh, Rosa Parks.
Thank you, Rosa Parks. Yes, the explanation was given that if we're going to do a celebration over Rosa Parks, why don't we all have everyone sit in the front seat, or at least have a lot of people sit in the front? And a lot of people like that idea. It makes perfect sense. If you're going to celebrate the creation through the Sabbath, why not create yourself? But you've got that look. Well, then someone else later on makes the statement. Why not rest instead? Because after Rosa Parks took her trip, rode on the bus, she went home and actually rested. And it is more widely accepted to do it that way, even though it really doesn't make much sense. But then as you detail it even further, the understanding of God resting on the Sabbath implies a separation, a cessation of work. Well, there was an explanation where when you are creating something, for an example, a painter, when you are painting something, the more you continue putting brush and paint to painting, you are still working, tweaking, developing its creation. At what point do you stop from creating, stop from developing to create a separation, to create a understanding that this is an individual, this is a separate entity now, this is completed, and now it has a life of its own, if you will. A
So,
building is not a building until you've built it. A painting is not a painting until you stop painting.
okay,
So apply that to the same mindset of the Sabbath. What would God be celebrating? What would God be having us celebrate by following the Sabbath? But then,
Okay, so if I can take that that really long thing and
Lilo Dallas.
shorten it up to Lilo Dallas multipass, then what you're saying is that we even see God setting up boundaries throughout the creation series. And it's not more pronounced and prominent to us than with the Sabbath, because in the creation series, where there is, man can't interfere with this, can't inject, can't postulate, can't hypothesize. It's God ceased from his work and he rested. That he set a boundary between my active involvement in creation and something else. So there was a boundary set on Sabbath.
so that's when it was separated
Yes.
from him, right?
So
Well, I don't mean separated, as in never to be able to be touched again, but his work, blessed be he, was separated from him, and he called it good.
yeah,
Actually, called it very good.
he said he ceased from his work and rested. So he stopped creating and he rested from it. And so there's a boundary from I'm actively working, like Jesse's using the painter. I'm painting. Oh, that's a beautiful painting. I'm not finished yet. I'm painting. Now he sets down the brush and says, it's done. It's finished. Here it is. And now the painting stands for itself. There's a separation. There's a boundary between the artist and the painting at this point in time. Whereas there was an active involvement, now there is almost, I don't want to say passive involvement because I don't want to imply the wrong thing when it comes to God and his creation in the universe. But there's a separation now. You can see the painting and you can enjoy it and look upon the painting without having to look upon the creator, and then you can pontificate here, what is the creator, what was his thoughts, what was he meaning, this brush stroke here, the color here, the palette here, etc., etc. We can talk about all these things, but now we're talking about the painting and the creator's involvement on that painting. But there's a separation now. And so we have a separation of boundaries going on. And that's what we see when we start off here, because the word kadosh means separated from. The word sanctify means separated for. So kadosh, which is always, well, I shouldn't say always, 99% of the time is translated as holy. Kadosh means separated from. You shall be separated from, for I, the Lord your God, am separated from. From what? Go back to Sabbath. Sabbath is separated from every other day of the week. It's separated from the mundane. It's separated from the average. It's separated from what we normally do throughout the process of life. This is separated. And as we see that with the title of our Torah portion, Kodashim, this is separations. How am I to be separated? What am I separated from? Well, all the other peoples, they don't treat their mother and their fathers so different. You will fear your mother and father, and you shall keep the separation days that I set for you. So we have physical aspects, and then we go into with the Sabbaths themselves. That's a time frame. So we're going to separate time as well. You're not going to bow down, etc., etc. Why? Because God is the one that established these things. He is the one that is in control of time and space. So you're not going to supplicate him or replace him with anything else that is not him. And then we go into everything as a separation. All these things are boundaries. God set up so many boundaries. When we go back to the Mishkan itself, the tabernacle, we have, here's the entire camp. All 12 tribes, 6 million people. But within that 6 million people, you're going to create a separation area. Just nobody camps in this area. And then within that area, I want you to build a wall. And then inside that wall, I want you to build a tent. And then inside that tent, I want you to put yet another curtain that divides it. And each one of these things are called kadosh, holy. But that most inner chamber is the kodashim, the holy of holies, the most holy place. But there's boundaries set, and there's rules on entering into and crossing those boundaries. And you don't ever want to blur the lines. And so everything we're seeing in this Torah portion is relating to just that. This is what you eat, and this is what you don't eat. Don't cross the lines. This is what you wear, this is what you don't wear. Don't mix the fabrics. And so we go on, even into the sexual laws in chapter 20. So you guys
don't cross the streams, John.
Yeah. So you guys take it from there.
So don't cross the streams, Egon. That's a good definition. I'm kind of fuzzy on this whole good bad thing, you know.
Well, to add more fuel to the explanation you helped with there. Take, for example, our blessings for the Shabbat. When Shabbat is started, we do Kiddush. We do Kiddush. It is to indicate the separation between the 6 days of labor and the Sabbath. At the end of the Sabbath, we do Havdalah, which is not an indication of the separation, but a reaffirmation that this day was separated for a purpose. You are apparently muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we say Kiddush, which comes from kadosh or kaddish, kodesh, which means holy, which means separated from. So we're separated. At this point in time, we separate this time frame from everything that precedes it. And Havdalah, which Havdalah means separated. It's a different context and a different version, but Havdalah means separated. Now we're saying that time that we just came out of is separated from everything going forward. So yeah, with Shabbat, with Kiddush and Havdalah, it's separation. And that's what I'm getting to, is the rest of this Torah portion is all about how do we separate? We don't do this. Why? Because I am the Lord. What has that got to do with anything? Because we see this over and over in this Torah portion, and throughout all of the Torah, there's certain laws that God gives us, and he doesn't give an explanation. He just says, because I'm God. So is he really saying, is he being the parent up there saying, go clean your room? Why do I have to clean my room? Because I said so.
If he was being the parent, then if he was being the parent in that light, then he did not stop creating. Because if you don't mind the jump back to the creation story as a definition of the painting that I used previously, a parent at some point has to cease enhancing the child, molding the child, shaping the child at a certain point, because they cannot develop on their own if the parent continues even after maturity to try to develop them. In fact, it can be destructive to the painting, to the child, to us, to Shabbat, to
Okay, but is that what we're trying to say here? Is that God gave us these rules, and where He says, "Don't do this, for I, the Lord, am your God."
learn separation because I separated myself.
Oh, because He's already explained at the opening of our Torah portion. You are holy because I am holy. And so, almost going back to that data burst type of thing, anytime you see a commandment and what follows is because I am the Lord your God, is to go back to you're to be holy because I'm holy. Why is this important? Because in this Torah portion and the last, and we'll see this over and over again, I separated you to myself. I pulled you out of Mitzrayim. I separated you from the darkness to be a light. I am the light. I am the source of light. Light comes from me. I have separated you from the darkness to be me in the darkness. I've separated you from Mitzrayim for you to live as I live. So anytime we see these commandments, you shall not turn to worthless idols, nor shall you make molten deities for yourselves. I am the Lord your God. It is going back to, I've separated you from this stuff. Why? Because you're holy. Because I am holy. You will be like me. Okay,
Exactly.
That's my pregnant pause.
Your pregnant pause. Exactly. You nailed it on the head. Because in all honesty, that's the biggest thing I've seen out of this Torah portion throughout. Even if we were to read further down, there's a separation, as you've already worded it. There's a separation of do not mix animals. There is a separation of do not mix trees. There's a separation of what kind of sexual intercourse is allowed and isn't allowed. And we had that even in Akremot, dealing with whose nakedness you are not allowed to view, you are not allowed to uncover.
Right, and you can't wear a piece of clothing that has mixed fibers in it. So
Exactly.
Yeah, no wool and linen to be mixed together, except for the priest and except for a tzitzit. Different topic. We won't go there. we won't go there. That'll take us off the Torah portion.
You might have to hit that rabbit trail when we get there.
When we get there, we'll discuss it, because that is an interesting one and an odd one. But the whole point is last week we saw all these, pretty much almost all of these commandments. We saw them last week, and we're revisiting them. Last week it was in the imperative negative. This week it's in the aspect of the reason the reason these things are forbidden from you is because you're separated from them. Sometimes I think we misjudge Judah and Israel. They are an exclusionary religion. When I say exclusionary, Judaism does not proselytize. It doesn't go out and actively convert. Christianity does, Islam does. Buddhism really not so much, but they are definitely open to receiving anybody, all comers type of thing. Judaism is not open to receiving all comers. They're kind of selective. I mean, you're going to be rebuffed 3 times, and then if you continue on this path, you're going to go through a time period of learning and understanding before you're truly going to be baptized and circumcised. If you're a male, you'll be circumcised. Females and males will be baptized or go through the mikveh. I use baptized because most of our audience understands that better. But when you come out of the mikveh, it's pronounced over you, behold, a new creation. Your former ways are dead to you. Your former world, your former way of living is dead to you. Don't return to it. Why? Because you're separated from that. So this Torah portion really is all about separations, or kadosh. What is holy?
Whatever is holy is what is separated. What has been made as a boundary of what is God's and what is the rest of the world's.
Well, also in proper dealing with each other, this portion also goes into you shall have just weights and a just hin in order to do business properly. You do it fair. You don't use fixed weights or fixed measurements in order to cheat someone. You give them the price of whatever it is they're buying. You give them that full quotient. If they're buying a pound of grain, they're getting a pound of grain. If they're buying a hin of oil, they're getting a hin of oil. So, and in this way, you treat justly with your neighbor. Again, do unto your neighbor what you would have them do unto you. So,
Yeah. So I mean that what you're talking about there, and a little bit before, and a lot after, is dealing with justice. I remember when I was a commander, bringing my officers and senior NCOs and let them know that, gentlemen, I don't believe in fairness. This is not socialism. This is not a communism. Not everyone is going to be treated the same. Sorry. If you expected to be treated the same as everybody else, you joined the wrong outfit. However, I believe in justice. And you really need to embrace that. Because justice says I deal with you and your situation different than Frank and his situation, and Jesse and his situation, and Martha and her situation. Why? Because you are different. Everyone is different. We have a different background, different understanding, different approach, a different reasoning as to why certain things are done. But I will deal with you in justice, and it will be strict justice. The law says this. Tell me why you broke the law. And I will weigh out the weights and measures appropriately. So we've got the justice aspect, but I almost want to say you kind of caveated that with treat your neighbor as yourself. And so let's go down to verse 18 with that. In verse 18 of chapter 19, it says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. I am Hashem. But where this conversation really starts, or this sentence or paragraph, this thought starts, is in verse 17. So I'm going to read verse 17 and 18, and I would like for everybody to try to pick out and differentiate the different thoughts that are happening here and why they are really all considered one commandment. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your fellow, but you shall not bear a sin on this account. You shall neither take revenge from nor bear a grudge against the members of your people. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. This is all one train of thought. So let's break it down for a moment. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. It doesn't say you shall not hate your brother. So what's the difference? Is the Torah allowing me to hate my brother just as long as I don't do it in my heart? Hold that thought. Because that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that.
Oh, thanks.
Can I hate my brother as long as I'm not doing it in my heart? So let's continue on. You shall surely rebuke your fellow, but you will not bear sin within this rebuke. At what point in time would I find a need to rebuke someone that I think has done me wrong? I just answered my own question. At what
You
point?
did answer.
At what point in time would I find the need to rebuke my fellow?
I could give a good example here. So if I was to say, have an issue with my brother, where I actually had to.
By the way, this is Christopher.
This is
Christopher,
Christopher.
this is the world. This is number 3 son.
Say hi,
Yeah.
Christopher.
He is one of my three. He is one of my 4 younger brothers. I almost miscounted there because
Get to the point.
Go ahead.
Okay, but anyways, if I was to have a problem with Christopher, and I felt the need as the older brother to correct that problem, I could correct it. I could get angry with him. I could fight with him, and he could fight with me. But at the end of it all, if I still hold a grudge, if I still bear in my heart anger towards him over it, my rebuking of him is null and void, and I'm the one at fault.
I think that's a good point. Here's what I see is happening here. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. In other words, Frank, I asked if I could borrow your lawnmower,
Right.
and you said no.
Okay.
I don't like that. I need a lawnmower. I'm in dire straits. The grass is knee high, and I've got no other way. I'm gonna have to go get a scythe, rent a lawnmower, or something because my lawnmower is broke, and I've got to cut the grass. And you just told me no. I'm upset with you for not being a neighbor. I would loan you my lawnmower if you needed it, and now you're denying me the ability to mow my lawn. But I smile and say, okay. And then you come up to me later and say, hey, Chris, can I borrow your saw? Oh, yes, Frank, you can borrow my saw. I'm not someone that would keep from loaning my saw to you.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm not like some people that wouldn't loan lawnmowers, Frank. You know, and
Okay, Chris. I'll borrow your saw. Bye.
So you really are hating your brother in your heart.
Yeah.
And what the Torah is saying is, if you think your brother has done something against you, don't bury that inside of you. Get it out now. Get it out. And there's a double-edged sword here. There's 2 horns on this goat, or 2 horns on this bull. One, you might have misunderstood the offense that you think your brother has caused. 2, you could restore your brother immediately. But if you don't get it out immediately and address the issue at the moment, then it's going to fester inside you. And if it festers inside you, you'll start plotting revenge. You'll bear a grudge. And that starts destroying you from the inside. And it sets up an unnatural boundary, a boundary that shouldn't be, a fence that shouldn't be there. We're talking about boundaries and fences that need to be there. This now is setting up a boundary and a fence between you and your brother that should not be there. Why? Because you didn't address it immediately. You didn't get it out.
Later and say, okay, Chris, I'm done cutting my grass. You can borrow my lawnmower now.
Yeah, and you could have said, no, not right now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to tell my wife, so Pam, Frank, that greedy little creep, he's got a lawnmower right there. I can see it. It's running. I can hear it running, and he's saying, no, I can't borrow it. He knows I got to mow my lawn, and he's hoarding it. He is just greedy. He's a no good. And what am I doing now? I'm gossiping.
Yeah, you're Lashon Hara, and as you said, you are killing me in front of the witnesses you're talking about me.
Yeah, and I'm cursing the deaf.
Huh? What?
I'm cursing someone that's not there that can defend themselves. But the Torah is saying, you got a problem with someone, get it out. I remember years ago, there was a sitcom called Frasier. A funny show. I really liked it. Kind of highbrow comedy. But within that, Frasier is dating this Jewish girl, and she's got problems with her mother, and she's not getting it out. And Frasier is a psychologist, and he has a different way of treating his father and his brother on the show, where they try to overlook each other's problems instead of getting it out. And right there in front of Frasier, in Frasier's apartment, his girlfriend and her mother just blow up at each other. And I mean, they're screaming and yelling, and accusations are flying. And within 5 minutes, they're hugging and loving on each other. And Frasier has an epiphany. Oh my goodness, if we would just get it out immediately, look how much healthier this would be for us. Instead of harboring it and putting it down. And then all of a sudden, Niles, Frasier's younger brother, throws up something from 20 years ago, and it's like, okay, you missed the point. You're supposed to get it out immediately so you're not harboring it for 20 years.
Yep. So I guess we aren't supposed to get mad at people who cut us off in traffic?
Now you're just cursing the deaf. He can't hear you.
I know, but I feel better.
Just give him the 5-finger wave. Not
But
the
I
one,
feel better.
not the 1-finger wave. Give him 5. Now there is an issue with this because Christianity doesn't quite view it this way, because they hinge, or they hang the issue on, if your brother offends you, then forgive him. If your brother strikes you, then turn the other cheek. But yet Torah kind of seems to be saying that if your brother offends you, then let him know. Get it out.
Yeah.
Have an understanding here. And I think that sometimes we misunderstand and misapply Jesus' words about turning the other cheek. That deals with greater circumstances. If it comes to the point of someone striking you, that's not your brother. And turning the other cheek is certainly not dealing with the issue. So I don't want to teach against the New Testament and Jesus' teachings here. What I want to be able to do is try to expound on it a little bit, and that is, the healthier mode is to get it out, but you have to get it out with understanding.
Well, doesn't Jesus say that, if you have aught with your brother, you go and you talk to him. If he doesn't listen to you, you bring witnesses. If he doesn't listen to that, you go before the church or the ecclesia. And if he doesn't listen to that, you try.
It sounded like you just cut off briefly.
Yeah, and so I think to expound on this teaching here is, deal with the issue immediately. Don't let it fester. Don't let it grow, because that will destroy you and set up an unnatural boundary. With forgiving your brother, absolutely, you should approach your brother with forgiveness and restoration in your heart. Turning the other cheek, this has gone to a different extent. And when it comes to the finalization or the crux of this commandment here in the Torah, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That is, if I've done something against Frank, I would really want Frank to let me know immediately so I can deal with it and at least explain it immediately.
Well, last Thursday, no, I'm kidding.
But that's kind of the point. And I think even Mark Smith, I remember years and years ago, he mentioned this. There was some grumblings going on in the congregation, and Mark had made a comment that, I don't know that I've done anything wrong if you don't tell me. But if you just cut off the relationship, that does nobody any good. I still don't know why you're upset with me or what's going on here, because you're still not talking to me. You're not even giving me a chance. It's almost as if you're killing me within yourself, just so that you can justify your own hatred towards me. And we were discussing it at the time, and it went right back to, why was the first temple destroyed? Because of baseless hatred. And baseless hatred comes back to this point. You harbored this within you based on a perception. You didn't get it out. You let it fester. And so some time ago, I was walking around barefooted outside and in the garage and such, and I got a little sliver inside my foot, and I
Ooh.
didn't notice it at first. It kind of felt like a little pinprick, and I kind of brushed it off and let it go. And about a week later, I mean, it's growing into like a calloused blister type of thing. And it wasn't until a week later that I noticed this, and now it's troubling me. And I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out what in the world. Do I have a corn? Do I have plantar fasciitis? I don't know, whatever it is I've got. And I got Pam looking at it, and she's digging in there, and we're anyways, it's a little bitty sliver of nothing. But because of where it was, I didn't quite notice the devastation that it was going to cause. And after time of relieving this and working with it and dealing with it, now it's all gone and it's all healed up. But had I have paused and stopped to deal with that short pain that I just wanted to bury and overlook, had I have dealt with it at the time, I could have reached in, pulled that little sliver out, and there'd have been no problem. But because I left the sliver in there and I chose to view it from my perspective only, it festered and it grew until it was uncomfortable. It caused me to walk different. It just changed my lifestyle. And our relationships are very similar to that. Someone said something. What'd you just say? Do I just go on believing what I thought I heard? Do I go on believing what I thought I saw? Or do I address it immediately? Whoa, 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 whoa. Help me understand. I'm not sure I heard you right. You were doing this over there. I'm not sure I understand why or what you were doing over there. Oh, well, let me explain. And they explain. Oh, okay, all right. I had the wrong impression. And the relationship continues healthily, normally. But if I keep that thought inside and I keep pushing it down and it festers up every time I see you, I don't like that guy. Well, why not? I don't know. There was something about him. He said something a while back. Well, what was he said? I can't remember exactly. I just know that he's a liar. He's a thief. He's a scoundrel. He's up to no good. And now we're creating an unhealthy and an unlawful division within ourselves and within our community. What else we got going on?
Well, looking over the Torah portion, I think we nailed all of the stuff that jumps out at first glance. I think I might have to bring the pickaxe and spade if we want to dig deeper, because we nailed a lot of it on the head. I mean, beyond here, it just explains that if you don't follow this, the land will vomit you out, because the nations did the same thing, and lo and behold, the land is vomiting them out. So do it, because I am the Lord your God.
Yeah, well, it's how do I put? I just had it when you said it. Okay, I'll come around to it again. Sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, for some reason I couldn't hear what Frank was saying. I could see his lips moving, but I couldn't hear anything coming out.
Well, I really wanted no. Okay. It all comes down to how we treat each other, and why we treat each other the way we do, and why we should treat each other the way God says we should treat each other. It's because, as you just said, we can be human, we can be petty, we can be, mischievous, we can be this, we can be that. But if we concentrate on what God tells us to do and do it that way, we'll have fewer, not no problems, but fewer problems. That's what I was going to say.
I see that, and I understand I understand and I agree with that. And with that, I actually think we nailed all our points today.
We hit
So
all the
how
nails
do
the
so
fuck up.
how do we so how do we go about wrapping this Torah portion up? Let's do your Lilu Dallas. Frank, Papa, anything?
It's the cosmic burrito. No, I like fajitas still, but
You and your cosmic burritos. Papa?
Yeah, it is interesting that we start out with you're going to be holy because I'm holy, and then as we go through both of these chapters, chapter 19 and chapter 20, when we get down to chapter 20, verse 26, it says, "And you shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and I have distinguished you from the peoples to be mine." So we do have the two bookends, and everything rolled up inside is that cosmic burrito. Is God is really telling us, you're to act like me. We try to teach our children to not only do the things that we do, but don't do the things that we did and regretted. So a lot of our teachings to our children are because of our own mistakes in as we were growing up, and we want our children to be better than us. Here, God is perfect, and He's saying, "I'm separate from the common. I'm separate from the mundane. I am not. I expect you to be separate from the common, to be separate from the mundane. Why? Because I pulled you out of that. I separated you from that. I did it in this grand, glorious thing that can never be denied. I took you out of Egypt. I saved you. I paid the ransom. I bought you. You're mine. Now, act like you belong to me. This is what I do, so you do it.
so
You're to
follow
be my
after his example.
representation. You're to be a royal priesthood. You're to be a light in the darkness. And all the world, as the prophets will say, and as Moshe says in Deuteronomy a couple of times, all the world will see you doing these commandments, and they will see that there is wisdom in it. Now that's fascinating, but it all deals with this separation. I separate things, I separate items, I separate times. And Jesse, you said it earlier today. During the creation and throughout all of Torah, we see three types of separation. What are they? Time, space. You said it. What was it?
Time, space, and energy.
Time, space, and energy. So I'm going to separate this time. This time is not like the rest of the time. This time is different. It's separated from that for God's purpose. This space, whether it be the space in my house, the Mishkan, the temple, whatever this space is, we see that throughout Torah there's not only times but space combined, and that is the laws of Nidah, and Nidah is separation as well. There's a time of separation between husband and wife, and a time of separation between men things and women things. There's separations throughout, but these are proper and holy separations because it leads to that sanctifying or setting us apart for the purpose of God, to serve out and do what it is that we're designed and purposed to do.
So
That's
we
my
should
wrap up.
follow God's example. We should follow after His example, right? Follow what I do what I do. So I wanted to touch on real quick. Do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. So does that mean I can't read my horoscope in the newspaper?
What do you mean by that? You can't read your horoscope in the newspaper?
Well, mediums, necromancers, all sorts of people who do divination, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to bring it up.
Well, I guess, and that's gonna derail us if we're not too careful. But I guess it would all depend on how it is applied and what your intention is behind gaining such information. Because, in all honesty, there have been times that I've looked at the astrology stuff just because I wanted to see how close their little interpretations of me compared to my personality, or compared to someone else's personality based on what they know of themselves. I don't use it to divine the future or see who I should marry or what meal I should eat Thursday before a test.
No, I get that.
So I guess.
Go ahead.
See, I still can't hear Frank.
You can't hear me?
He's been having some trouble hearing you for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can hear you, and that's the strange part about this, because you've had freezing issues, and then Papa can't hear you, and
yeah.
Can
So
Chris hear you?
am I talking over him now?
no, you're not.
You go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess, Frank, what you're kind of touching on is in verse 31 of chapter 19. You should not turn to, in the Hebrew is ov ve yidoni, and it's odd how it's translated, whether it be any Jewish translation or the English translations, the Christian translations. It varies, but you'll not turn to sorcery or witchcraft, and the Yidoni is a wizard. You should not seek these and thereby defile yourselves through them. And so a lot of people attribute that to astrology, or diviners or things like that. But let's not forget for a moment that in the foundation series in Genesis chapter 1, the stars are put into the heavens for what? For signs and seasons. So the stars are there for a sign for you. And it's not just a sign to tell time. It's even on a grander scale, because God put this in place for a purpose and a reason. I'm not advocating astrology. I want you to understand this. It is that the stars are there for a purpose. Are we understanding them? For that matter, we have there's no less than no less than two prophets that look up into the stars, and they're divining the time based on the stars. Oh, well, that's okay because it's a prophet of God. Oh, really? What's the difference between Madame O'Hare and her astrology reading in the Sunday newspaper and the prophet looking up into the skies and seeing the stars and understanding that these times are right? Better yet, for the Christian in the audience, we've got the Magi. How did they know when to come and seek out Jesus? Because they saw a star. And they were following the stars. They were reading the signs in the heavens, recognizing that a king is born in Israel. How did they know Israel? Well, the stars told them. Well, is this wrong? Is this bad? After all, it's included in the New Testament. It sounds like it's a good thing. My point is this. Let me add another point to it. Balaam and Balak. Balaam was a prophet of God. That's exactly what the Torah says. He's a prophet. Not a good one, obviously, because his end result is going to be death. And God's going to see to it that he dies. He leads the children of Israel astray. So let's keep this in perspective. There are things out there. There are people that can connect in the spiritual realm. What is the purpose and what is the direction? God tells Aaron and Miriam when they're bickering, and God basically sets them down, says, shut up, sit down, let me tell you something. I'm going to fill your head with a little bit of knowledge if you'll accept it, and that is all the other prophets, they're going to come and they're going to go. And all the prophets, I'm going to come to them. I'm going to speak to them in parables. I'm going to speak to them in riddles. I'm going to speak to them in visions and in dreams. But not Moshe, Moshe and I, we talk face to face like friends. He gets the clear picture. Everybody else gets a blurred version of it. Now, I'll tell you this from firsthand experience and firsthand account, whether it be drug-induced or through fasting and prayer. Opening into the spiritual realm and joining forces in a almost an outer body experience type setting, an ethereal atmosphere. The lines are blurred. Physical reality and spiritual reality become blurred. And in that moment, in that time, and like I said, whether it be prayer and fasting, drug-induced, elation over music during praise and worship, and you're filled up, you're caught up in this, the lines get blurred. Things can be misspoken and misinterpreted because the boundaries aren't as clear for a physical man in a spiritual existence and a spiritual understanding. And God is warning us here in this verse. Don't chase after those things. Don't run to those things for your understanding. Why? Because the lines are blurred. That is man reaching up to the spiritual, not God providing the proper path and the proper setting. There's a proper way to enter into this understanding, and there's an improper way. Balaam is improper. Modern day astrology is improper, though I think there's some truth to modern day astrology based on the ancient understandings of astrology and how the stars tell the signs and the seasons. If I'm chasing for that for my understanding, then I'm using it inappropriately. I'm blurring the lines. I'm mixing the boundaries. I'm not setting the boundary appropriately and doing it God's way. I hope that helps clarify and understand what I'm trying to get across.
And that's what I was kind of leading up to. You said it better than I could, but that's what I was trying to say. Don't chase after something like that. So, yeah, I'm good.
Well, then that it seems like all the points are nailed on. So, in order for me to try to wrap up my point of view, I feel like I might be repeating what has already been said, but here we go. As was said about the lines, the boundaries are there for a reason. There is a reason for every boundary dictated both by God and by man. Granted, I'm about to step on some toes with this one about Talmud. But in all honesty, if you are truly concerned, if you're truly determined to figure out where the boundary is, where the true defining line is between what is yours, what is others, and what is God's, you kind of need to have caution, if you will. You have to have determination to try to better understand God in general. It is those boundaries that allow, it is because of those boundaries is why the many rabbis, it's not just a handful, they take a lot of rabbis when it comes to very specific things in Talmud. They bring them together to discuss individual points as to where the boundary lines should be drawn, because if you cross that, you risk going against what God has already set forth.
Yeah, there's an old Jewish comic strip that has a guy saying that he's against man-made fences as he drives his car off a cliff, and the other guy is saying it's not a fence, it's a guardrail. It's there to protect you. It's not there to keep you away from something.
Exactly.
It's there for protection.
Exactly. And in all honesty, this Torah portion kind of demonstrates that there is a reason for separation. There is a reason for boundaries. And we've seen it in previous parts of this entire book of Leviticus, especially with Nadab and Abihu. They crossed the boundary. They paid for it with their lives for crossing the boundary. The guardrail statement, as you gave, is perfect for that. And that's what I sum it up as, is this Torah portion gives another explanation, another description as to why there are boundaries. God said, separate yourself because I separated myself from you. I caused this separation so that you can exist, you can develop on your own. So separate yourself so that you can be more, pardon the phrasing, pardon the layman's terms, but you can be more like me.
Cool.
And
Cool.
that's
all right. Any last minute things? Anything else? Because can everybody hear me this time or not?
Probably not. I can hear you, but anyways, let's just wrap it up from here. For those who have enjoyed the show, who have listened in, this has been another week of 2.5 Opinions. We thank you for joining with us, whether you watched through YouTube or watched through Messianic Lamb Radio or watched in other forms or fashions. We are glad you joined. If you have a comment, a question, or a concern, pop into YouTube or send it to us through Lamb Radio. We'll be sure to answer it to the best of our ability, or at least what we know, considering we're just 3 opinions. I'm going to say 2.5 opinions, but 3 opinions trying to debate what we believe Torah is.
And at the end of the day, your opinion doesn't mean squat, and my opinion is even less. The only opinion we really care about is what's God's opinion on this.
Amen there.
Right. Okay, so I'm Frank.
I'm Yishai.
I'm not the Rebbe.
And we'll see you next week. God willing, and the creek don't rise. Shavua Tov, Laila Tov, Lehitrot.
Shavua Tov, Laila Tov, Lehitrot.